Hello everybody and welcome back to more political chatter. In this video we will be talking about the latest poll from every single Senate race in 2024. Now, this is not a prediction, of course, or anything like that. We have polls from almost every single state. Some of the most safe Republican or Democrat states, we don't have any polls, unfortunately, as well as for the states that don't have any Senate races this year, in the dark gray, as you see on the map. But in most states, we do have polls from each Senate race, and we will be looking at what the latest poll indicates. That's always, important or interesting to look at, is what the latest polls are showing from each state and how those latest polls change over the election cycle. So in 2024, there are Senate races in 34 states. And of course, there are 100 seats in the Senate, so 51 seats are needed for the majority, or you can have 50 plus the vice president, because the vice president casts the tie-breaking vote when a tie occurs. But we will be saying right here that 51 seats are needed for majority for simplistic reasons. So that means that we have 34 races across the country, across many states. The Democrats currently have 28 seats before the 2024 elections, and the Republicans have 38. So there will be 34 races up for grabs in 2024, and these races will decide who controls the Senate after the 2024 elections. So before we get into this video, please consider subscribing. That helps a lot. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers. That's the goal. Make sure to comment down below suggestions. Join the Discord server in the pinned comment, as well as become a channel member. That helps out a lot. So with that being said, let's get into this video. So we will be going in alphabetical order. State like Alabama does not have a Senate race in 2024. But let's see, in our list, Arizona does, and we start off with a very critical race in 2024. This is a race that is being watched closely because we have a losing candidate from 2022 face off against a strong Democrat. But in 2020, or in 2018 even, it was very close. Kyrsten Sinema only won by 2. And in the 2020 presidential election, Biden only won the state by something like 11,000 votes. However, this Senate race, the latest poll indicates that the Democrat wins by 8%. Ruben Gallego is elected the next senator by 8%. So that would be huge. I'm honestly thinking it is somewhere close to that. I don't think quite 8%, but that is what I'm thinking right now. So Ruben Gallego versus Kari Lake. Latest poll indicates that Ruben Gallego wins by 8 percentage points. So we don't have any race in Arkansas, but we do have a race in California. Looking at the 2024 election now, we see that Adam Schiff, the Democrat, is currently beating the Republican Steve Garvey by 24 percentage points in the latest poll, so that'd be a safe state for the Democrats. In Colorado does not have a Senate race in 2024, but Connecticut does. But unfortunately, we don't have any polls coming out of Connecticut yet, and that's because the Republican race for being the Republican candidate in November is still very much up in the air. So, but if there is not a poll coming out from a state, we will be saying that it will be safe, because that generally means that it isn't competitive really at all. Delaware does have a Senate race. I don't think. So we only have a poll from the Democratic primary, but that's not what we care about. So Delaware will be safe Democrat. Florida has a Senate race. Used to be a critical battleground state, and we see that in the last poll, the Republican incumbent Rick Scott wins by 8%. Now that's a very solid margin, but. Or not solid, but very healthy margin, but it's not even as good as the past few, where Rick Scott is winning by safe margins, 15%, 17%, 18%. So that means that Florida in the latest poll is a likely margin state for the Republicans. Georgia does not have a Senate race this year. In Idaho, Idaho doesn't have a Senate race either. I don't think Illinois does either. Yep, it doesn't. Indiana does, however. And we have one poll coming out of this race, and it's surprisingly close. I'm not sure who this McCray guy is, but Jim Banks, this is an open seat, so neither of these candidates are our incumbents, our current senators. So that probably explains the close race here. But I don't expect it to stay this close, but that is a likely margin as of right now, according to the polls. No Senate race in Iowa. Um, in Kansas, no Senate race. In Kentucky, I don't believe we have a Senate race. No, we don't. In Louisiana, do we? No, no Senate race in Louisiana either. In Maine, we do have a Senate race, and this is, and we don't have any polls coming out of it, but there is an incumbent named Angus King who is an independent officially, but does caucus with the Democrats, kind of like a Bernie Sanders type figure. So we'll just be characterizing that as Democrat, and that would be safe since there are no polls coming out of the state. In Maryland, now this is a very interesting race because we have a pretty strong Democrat. I feel Angela Alsobrooks, but she is facing off against an incredibly strong Republican, for Maryland at least, Larry Hogan. He's the former governor, very popular in the state. But we do see that in the latest poll, in Alsobrooks versus Larry Hogan, there hasn't been any very recent ones, but we see that in the latest Alsobrooks versus Hogan poll, Alsobrooks is winning by 10%. So that'd be a likely margin, say, as of right now. That is actually where I think it will fall in November, around 10%. In Massachusetts, I doubt we have any polls. We do. We do have one poll between Elizabeth Warren and Republican named Kraft. Warren does lead by 23%, so that's a safe margin there. And then in Michigan, definitely a battleground state. We see that in the latest poll, Democrat versus Republican, Elisa Slotkin versus Mike Rogers. Elisa Slotkin is leading by 4%, so that'd make it a lean margin. That's the closest state indicated so far. Now moving on to Minnesota. In the latest poll, we have the incumbent Democrat Amy Klobuchar leading the Republican by 14%, so that's a likely margin state there. And then in Mississippi, we do have a Senate race with, but none from 2024, which is not really surprising, but Roger Wicker, the incumbent, does win re-election by a safe margin. In Missouri, we see that in the latest poll, we have incumbent Josh Hawley, the Republican, facing off against a pretty strong Democrat, Lucas Kunce, but still it's not really all that close. Josh Hawley wins by 14%. And then we have Montana, I think the most critical, the closest state really, for the Senate elections in 2024. We have the latest poll, the incumbent Democrat Jon Tester, losing by 3% to Republican Tim Sheehy. Republicans need this state to flip the Senate. This will be if Republicans win Senate control, it will be because Montana. It is very likely to flip as of right now, and the latest poll indicates that. It does indicate that Tim Sheehy does win. But you see this poll from February actually shows Jon Tester up by 2%, and one from February that shows him up by 9%. So definitely interesting. Nebraska, we actually have 2 Senate races, and one so we only have polling from the main Senate race. So we have a main Senate race, a normal Senate race, as well as the special election. The special election has no polls, so that's safe. But there is an independent running in Nebraska in the regular election, and you see that the incumbent, Deb Fischer, who's the Republican, only has a 4-point lead in the latest poll over Dan Osborne, the independent. However, the poll before, it is sponsored by the Dan Osborne campaign. But the poll before that showed Dan Osborne up by 2%. So this is only a lean margin win for Deb Fischer there in Nebraska. That would be a real shock if that happens and, parties actually put money into that race. Now look at Nevada. Biden only won the state by 2% in 2020. Jackie Rosen, the incumbent Democrat, is leading by 14% in the latest poll, and then 11 and 13 in those polls. So this is increasingly looking like a easy Democratic win there. No race in New Hampshire, but in New Jersey we do have a race. So in the latest poll we have Andy Kim, the Democrat, versus someone as a Republican, but he is only up by 9%, which surprises me considering Andy Kim's popularity in the state. New Mexico, we do not have any polls. Now this one will not be safe, but for the purposes of the video, I am putting it safe since I said if there are no polls from a state, I am characterizing it as safe. And we have no polls also from New York, but we do have some generic Republican polls like where instead of just putting the name of the Republican, we don't have a Republican nominee yet, so they just say generic Republican. But the website that I'm using does not list those, so we'll say safe Republican or Democrat. I mean, in North Carolina, we don't have any poll, or sorry, there's no Senate race. And then in North Dakota, we actually do have a poll, which shocks me. We have the Democrat, Diane, I think her name, Diane Christensen, versus Kevin Cramer, the incumbent Republican. And we see that Cramer is up by a safe margin of 26%. Then we have Ohio, one of the most critical battleground states in 2024. Democrat Sherrod Brown currently has this seat. But we see that in the latest poll, there has not been a single poll since Bernie Moreno won the Republican nomination, which is really shocking. But in the latest poll, which was before he won the Republican nomination, Sherrod Brown currently leads by 11. So I think it will be a lot closer than that. I do think that Sherrod Brown does hang on by a very small margin, but I doubt it is by anywhere near 11 points. I'm thinking more in the 2-point end. Now we move on to the state of Oklahoma. They do not have a race, actually. In Oregon, do they have a race? No, they do not. In Pennsylvania does, though. We see that in the latest poll, Dave McCormick, the incumbent Democrat, is up by 8%, so that seat stays with the Democratic Party. Rhode Island does have a race, but there are unfortunately no polls from that race, so we can expect it to be a safe margin there. In South Carolina, I don't know. We don't have any poll, or we don't have a race in South Carolina. Do we in South Dakota? No, we don't in South Dakota. We do in Tennessee, though. We see that in the latest poll, the incumbent Republican Marsha Blackburn is only up by 11%. Now, that would be a pretty good performance by the Democrats. In my personal prediction, I think that Marsha Blackburn does win by more than that, though. In Texas, we have Ted Cruz, the incumbent Republican, up by 13% over Colin Allred. That's pretty expected. Texas is still pretty Republican, even though it is trending heavily to the right. But now, let's move on to the state of Utah. We have, so these are our Republican primary polls, and that's because we have a very crowded and close Republican primary. But no general election polls, which doesn't surprise me because it won't be all that competitive. So Utah, safe Republican. Vermont, I doubt we have any polls. No, we don't. So that's safer. Bernie Sanders, assuming he runs. I think he filed paperwork or something. In Virginia, Tim Kaine, the incumbent Democrat, against Hung Kao, the Republican. Tim Kaine up by 12. I expect the result to be similar to that. I don't think that race will be particularly close considering how weak of a candidate Hung Kao is. In Washington, latest poll shows the incumbent Democrat Maria Cantwell only up by 9%. Now, that's really shocking because she won by 17% last time around. That'd be a really good performance by the Republicans there. In West Virginia, we have 0 general election polls. Not surprising because we have Joe Manchin retiring here, so that's a flip for the Republicans, and Montana was a flip also. So all they need is one more state for the majority. I can, with Wyoming still yet to be called, you can assume what happens there. But in Wisconsin, the incumbent Democrat, Tammy Baldwin, this was supposed to be a close race, but polls really are not indicating that. The latest polls show Tammy Baldwin up by a lot. The very latest shows her up by 12, a likely margin there. And then Wyoming, I assume we have no polls. No, we don't. So that is a safe margin for the Republicans. And Wyoming, oh wait, what about Hawaii? Well, okay, where is Hawaii? How did I skip Hawaii? Sorry about this. Alright, so am I just blind or did they erase Hawaii from this thing? Yeah, I don't see Hawaii anywhere. Okay, well, we'll call it safe Democrat because it probably will be. So, the Republicans take control of the Senate, according to the latest poll from every state. Now, this is interesting because this map exactly aligns with my current prediction. I think that Republicans will flip Montana and West Virginia and that they will win 51 seats, and that the Democrats will hold on to Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, giving them 49 seats. So thank you all for watching this video. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Become a channel member. That helps out a lot. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers. Again, this is the map, and I'll see you all later.